This is a film festival which started in 2007 at the University of Missouri in St. Louis. I'm not going to ask you a geography question, and how many of you know where Missouri is? Okay, 3 people. How many of you know about Ferguson? Have you heard about Ferguson? How many of you? Again, 3 people, only 3 people heard about Ferguson. Okay, 4. The reason I brought Ferguson is that that's where Missouri is. That's where our university is, 22 miles from Ferguson. So Ferguson is a place where there is a serious uprising going on in America right now after the killing of Michael Brown. You might have heard it on the news. Anyway, that will give you an indication where Missouri is. So I'm from St. Louis, University of Missouri, and we started this film festival back in 2007. This is the 9th year running.
I think they don't believe you are really from St. Louis.
I guess so, that's the reason. Yeah, of course I'm not American. Well, I'm an American, but not really an American. Originally I'm from East Africa, from Ethiopia and Eritrea. So that might solve some of the problem. So hopefully most of you know where Ethiopia and Eritrea are located. So if you don't know, that's a problem. I'm okay if you don't know Missouri, but I'm not okay if you don't know Ethiopia and Eritrea. This film festival is an international film festival. It travels around the world. It's not all about Africa, it's about the experience of the African people. So people of African origin all around the world. So we have films from the Caribbean, we have films from Latin America, Africa, as further away. I know, he's stealing all the attention. And one of our partners, of course, is here at your University of Ghana, but we also have other partners in places like Nigeria, South Africa, in Africa, and also we have a partner in Cameroon. And also in the Caribbean, we take this film to places like Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and of course in Europe we have a location in London. So it's a year-round film festival with travel. The whole idea of the festival is simple: for us to learn through documentary films about the history, the culture, the politics, the economy, everything about Black people, where we are, what we need to do. But the most important thing which you guys will learn from this experience is that although these films are not about Ghana, you will see and relate to the experiences of people in the other part of the world, through their history, through their struggle, through their challenge, but also through the effort they put to overcome those challenges. So if this film, the 3 films today doesn't relate to those kind of experience, you have to come back tomorrow and relate to those experiences through the other films. So we are here until Saturday. We're going to screen a number of films, and all films are going to be thought-provoking. They're supposed to be something to make us think harder about our experience, about our challenge, about our fortunes also, but also how does that relate to us? As Ghanaians, does that mean that we are living in a bubble right here in Accra? That's it, that's where we need to focus, or do we need to see ourselves beyond Ghana, beyond Africa for that matter? Because the experience people share or have in Barbados, or the experience people have in Brazil, have so much similar things also to the experience you have in Ghana, including, for example, as young men watching their phones while somebody is talking. So that's also an experience which we share in places like America. So joking aside, I really want you to watch this film and kind of relate it to the experience, to the knowledge you have in your mind and yourself, and then at the end of the film festival, hopefully we'll have a lively discussion. So the whole idea is not for someone, either myself or Professor Cambon or anyone to come and lecture, but again, to share our experiences, to learn from each other. But again, you need to come up with a right idea to say, okay, this is what I get from this film. This is what I'm understanding from this film. This is what I'm understanding from the history there. I mean, when we talk about the Ethiopian history, the film on Ethiopia, or the Kenyan film, or for that matter, the Central African Republic, in the 6 minutes, very great film, but you can see what it means to be African. You can see what it means to be Black. But again, unless we share that from your own perspective, from the young student perspective, then there's no point of having a documentary. So So enjoy the film, but I'm looking forward for your thoughtful and mind-boggling discussion at the end of the day. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you coming to this festival.
All right, and is the class rep here? Do we have a class rep? Or are you going to elect one right now? Okay, wonderful. If you can get a sign-in sheet going around.
I've done that.
Oh, you've already done it.
Okay, so has everyone signed in? You haven't yet? So be sure to sign in before we close out, and we'll go ahead and get started for today.
Your head while you are watching these videos. So if you have any question, anything that got your attention so much that you want to discuss with us, please, the floor is yours. Any question, any contribution? I mean, having watched the documentary you just saw, the impudence of these Europeans, after putting the Ethiopians through the struggle, they have the impudence to try and actually have raised a monument. So Mugabe said that South Africans have the guts to slap or manhandle their own brothers from different African countries, but didn't have the courage, to antagonize the very people that put them through slavery in the name of apartheid regime. So recently, those of you that are current, you realize that there is this colonialist known as Cecil Rhodes, responsible for what we call the Unilateral Declaration of Independence for Rhodesia. And South Africans are trying very well to put down the monument erected in honor of Cecil Rhodes. I mean, one of the dreadful colonists you could ever think of. So after watching this documentary, if you have any question, any suggestion that you want to give to us, that's what is open now. Yes?
Thank you very much. I came to meet the second and third movies, so I'll just give a little comment on those two. Watching the two films, I noticed there was a leadership issue. You understand? And a colleague of mine usually says that everything rises and falls on leadership. And what we are having right now, even the setting, this Black History Month that we're celebrating, is being made possible because of leadership that somebody or a group of people have put together to allow us to enjoy these. So we are leaders in our own right. You might think that because you're not a ceremonial leader out there that people are looking at you, so you wouldn't do right for people to criticize you, that in your very own corner, we should try to do right, and let's hold our leaders accountable. And that when leadership goes wrong, a lot of people suffer. Like the second movie, I noticed Dorothy died, and another person was raped, got HIV/AIDS. That's so bad. And it's on us to be responsible leaders and ensure that our leaders are doing right. It's on us. Thank you.
Yes, so once again, on the issue of leadership, do you think that the International Criminal Court is trying to be vindictive? I mean, trying to, bring out African leaders into, prosecuting them? Because if you look at most of the leaders on the ICC list, majority of them are African leaders. But in fact, all of them are African leaders. And so you would want to think, is it a deliberate attempt to victimize these African leaders? That is not to say, however, that most of them, some of them have been guilty. But is it a deliberate attempt to victimize these African people, because we've had several European, like the gentleman you just saw, Rodolphe Graziani. I mean, after the Second World War, there were so many attempts by the Ethiopian government to implicate this gentleman. But because of the support he was enjoying from Britain and then France. Now, mind you, in 1935, this was when the League of Nations had already been established. And so one would have thought that Italian invasion of Abyssinia was going to be stopped by the League of Nations. But Britain and France, they stood by and allowed Italy to invade Abyssinia. Just because they didn't want to upset what you call the balance of power in Europe. This was the time that Germany was also moving ahead as one of the most treacherous power in Europe. So they were just bidding time so Italy could not fall in the arms of Germany. And so they watched and stood by as Italy did what it did in Ethiopia. And then also, you should also remember that in 1896, the Ethiopian forces had been decisively defeated by the Ethiopians. And so they wanted a phase semi-divide. They wanted a second comeback. Because they just couldn't stand the humiliation that the Ethiopians did to them in what you call the Battle of Adwa in 1886. And so it was a form of retaliation. And once again, the European countries stood by, and what Italy did was it did to Ethiopia in 1935. So once again, it just brings us to the question I'm trying to ask. Do you think in a way the International Criminal Court is trying to victimize African leaders? When we look at what was done in Serbia, was done in Kosovo, was done in Croatia, do you think, some of these leaders, these European leaders might have gone scot-free, comparing them to how African leaders are being victimized? Any other thought that went into your head? Particularly the first one that you watched in Central African Republic. Any question, any contribution? Questions, contributions?
For your
I'm sure-
questions in class, I know you all are deep thinkers. I know you are a bit tired, but try to do something. Or do you need
When I
help?
watching the video, there were certain moments that I had so much money. So what were the lines that you're making about?
I don't really know how the war ended. So I want to ask.
Now, if he wants to know how the war ended in Ethiopia, now you should know that in general, we are looking at a period between one particular Italian leader. His name was known as Benito Mussolini, and he came to power in 1922. So when he came to power, there was this calculated attempt to try to resuscitate the fallen glory of Italy. And so right from this onset, they made several what you call territorial organizations to claim certain territories in the name of Ethiopia. But unfortunately, by 1945, because of the coming together of seven European powers, Britain, France, and the US, the Nazist power of Italy and that of Japan, combined with that of Germany, were going to be defeated. So by 1945, the what you call the political and the military hegemony of Italy in Ethiopia, together with the first influence, was going to be defeated. So by 1945, all these issues that we had about Italy's rise to power, particularly under Benito Mussolini, came to an end when Adolf Hitler was defeated in 1945. And please, any other questions?
Well, I want to add one thing. What's especially about the last film, what made this Italian-Ethiopian War of 1935 different from any other war? Anybody? Why do you think? Why do you think we always? I mean, your professor said we learn European history. We never learn about our history. That's for fact. But at the same time, we tend to lower the importance of our history. Right now, he mentioned to you that Italy invaded Ethiopia. Mussolini tried to invade Ethiopia in 1975. Ethiopia was the only sub-Saharan African nation at that time who was a member of the League of Nations. Italy was the League of Nations. So when a League of Nations member country invaded another League of Nations member country, what happened? what should happen? Imagine now, if a UN member state invaded Ghana, another UN member state, what would UN do right now? Why did the United Nations first of all was formed? So that this kind of illegal invasion of countries would be stopped. The same thing, the idea behind League of Nations after the First World War was to avoid this kind of invasions by countries. But again, Italy, a League of Nations member country, invaded another League of Nations country with the blessing of Britain, France, because they don't want Italy to ally with Germany, which was at that time kind of building up its arms. Germany didn't invade Poland until 1939. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, we said the Second World War officially starts because the European country was invaded. But in 1935, when an African country, an independent African country, was invaded, we never called it a world war. When Japan invaded China, Manchuria in 1937, we never called it a world war. But when Germany invaded Poland, that's when the world war. That's a European history for us. So if I ask you when did the World War start, the Second World War, you definitely would say 1939 to 1945. Nobody would say 19. But if I ask a Chinese right now, he would tell you it's 1937 because that's their history. When Japan invaded Manchuria. As an African here, when did the war start? If it's a world war, shouldn't it be 1935? That's what folks. That's why this film is important. At least it gives us that indication that our history or the invasion of our brotherly and sisterly countries doesn't even matter. That shouldn't be the case. We should always be focused. Again, we can fast forward 550 years, 60 years. World wars means when 5 countries are involved in a war. Minimum. That's the minimum definition of a world war. We had the same war in Congo going on with Angola, Zimbabwe, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, Ethiopia, Sudan. All these countries involved in Congo. More than 1 million people died. Do we call it a world war? Do we even hear about these wars? That tells you about how history is being written. It's up to you to rewrite history. It's up to you, the Lions, to rewrite your history. Because right now we are learning about whose history? The hunter's perspective. We are being taught. So hopefully from this film you learn about that. Then from the previous film, I think, and also to a certain extent the third film, we see about impunity. Those who are responsible are not taken accordingly to the rule of law. Graziani was left to go free. Now we are building a monument for him. It's not a surprise. There are monuments for German Nazis everywhere. But when it's an African leadership, I'm not saying that they have done right. We are the first one to make sure that the ICC is the first one to make sure to crack down very hard. There is a double standard. We haven't heard anybody trying to try George Bush for his crime in Iraq. Did you ever heard that? Yeah, America is not a member of ICC, doesn't even recognize ICC. That's a different case. Kenya might not even recognize ICC, but doesn't free Kenyatta from being tried by that court. So there is a double standard here. And we can blame the West, we can blame everybody, but it's up to us to start rewriting our history. Hopefully this kind of films will give you that perspective that it's up to us, each and every one of us, especially the youth, to be really stand up, write your history. Because right now you are learning history from the hunter's perspective. You, the Lions, are not writing your own history. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
I don't have an answer. I have a question which is very much in line with what you just said. All right, about America and their relationship with the ICC. at the time that the UN Security Council gave way for the intervention in Libya, Libya was also not a member of the ICC. They have not ratified any ICC statute in their country. And yet, even before Gaddafi was eventually killed, the ICC had issued a warrant on his head. So, why, when it's very obvious today that George Bush and Tony Blair are criminally responsible for all the carnage that occurred after the invaded Iraq, why has the UN Security Council sat by and not issued an arrest warrant on their head? Once again, what does it do? It repeats the fact that some people are above the law and others are not.
Okay, I want to share a quick quote, right? And this is along the lines of the question that was asked. And this is a quote from Robert Mugabe. Has anyone ever heard of Robert Mugabe? So basically he said that it's high time Africa established its own ICC to judge Western leaders who have committed plunder and mass murder on the African continent. So this is his quote. He says, "They committed crimes, colonial crimes galore, the slaughter of our people, and all that imprisonment," President Mugabe told reporters at the Harare International Airport, where he was seeing off the Malian President Ibrahim Kenyatta. "I have a case. Why was I in prison for 11 years? We forgave them, but perhaps we've not done ourselves justice. There should be justice for all. If you set up the ICC, we set our ICC to try Europeans, to try Mr. Bush and Mr. Blair. I think we must be respected in Africa." This is now Keita from Mali. "We know that our legal systems need to be improved for sure, but there's business that we have to deal with between ourselves and Africa, by Africans, by our people. Our people are the only judges of what we'll be doing and what might have done in our countries. It's unacceptable, particularly when we know that there are leaders from somewhere else in the world who've done worse than us, but they've not been judged, and we've never asked questions about them. What we're obliged to question is justice only for Africa. I think we have to be fair when dealing with justice. When we want justice, it must be justice for all. That's the way it has to be in order to be fair. Otherwise, we have the right to also question that system." So this is Mugabe and of Zimbabwe and Keita of Mali, calling for exactly what we're talking about. When we're talking about impunity, we look at other Africans and say, yes, try them immediately. And in class, we talked about a different perspective on Hitler, right? Given by Kwame Ture, where he says the major issue that Europeans have with Hitler is that he did to other Europeans what was only reserved for African people. So when the first Holocaust took place in Namibia, no problem. We don't even know that that happened. When I asked about the Holocaust, how many people know about the very first Holocaust done by the Germans? But when they do the same thing that they've reserved for you Africans to other Europeans, now world wars. Now this is a tragedy. Now this is a crime against humanity. But if all of you in the room are shot, killed, raped, murdered today, that's fine. That's fine for Africans. So again, Hitler and what Hitler did to other European countries, it weakened them enough that it even ushered in a place where now we can benefit to say, you know what? Now we can challenge these Europeans, right? Before they were so strong, how are we going to challenge Britain? How are we going to challenge France? But now they've been bombing each other left, right, front, and center. So now this even opens up a window of opportunity for Africans. So while you're so busy crying about white people killing other white people, right? Perhaps you should be shedding tears for your own African selves and start thinking about history with a more critical and analytic eye, as opposed to this is the history to tell you you're crying for these white people, but don't worry about Namibia. Matter of fact, we won't even tell you about this. Right? and we'll wrap up. I hear the sighs like, oh, 2 hours of Africa talking about Africa. Ah, you're messing up my 20 years.
This is just a question. I know the Institute of African Studies are been around for quite some time now. And with all this knowledge around and with this view of how our school curricula is designed, usually, or as it is, we grow up with the knowledge of probably the only African stuff that we learn is mainly how we're colonialized. Aside that, we virtually hear nothing else. With all this around, my question is there anything being done probably to the school curriculum so that at least at a certain age we can be introduced generally to some aspect of African studies other than what actually pertains, which in a way makes, I would say, only seems to bring about some level of inferiority in the African nature to probably some other great things that we might have.
This is an excellent question, and since I've been here since coming up on 2 years now, right? So I'm pretty new here on the scene. And in each semester I have someone ask, why do I have to wait till university to learn anything about Africa? Right? There are some students are mad. They say, I've learned all this about every single European, just random stuff. Oh, on this date, a European tripped over a rock. And I have to memorize it and write it for BC. But here, African people invented writing, I've never heard it. Now, this even comes to the role of each individual, including yourself. You may go on to be Minister of Education, I don't know. Right? Now, just me as an individual, I said that I looked at the curriculum that we had for Intro to African Studies, and I wept. Because a lot of the things that we're even talking about wasn't included in the curriculum. But these are things, my parents owned the bookstore and cultural center, so I grew up from a young age. I won a Black History Month contest when I was in first grade, 6 years old. Right? So these are things that I've always seen as being very important. So now as an individual, I come into the setting and I say, you know what, I'm going to do something different. I think each one of us has that responsibility and that choice. If we see that the information isn't there, you can't do, again, we go to the quote by Rodolfo Rashidi, what we do for ourselves depends on what we think of ourselves. What we think of ourselves depends on what we know of ourselves, and what we know of ourselves depends on what we have been told. Now you have been told, so now what are you going to do? For me, I'm just coming into the system, but I see that as one significant strategic place to go to the schools, to get into the curriculum, to have University Teachers of Ghana Association to come and say, this is our position. You should not teach about Columbus if you can't teach about Abubakar II, who went there first, right? You can't teach about Prince Henry the Navigator, and you can't teach about Mansa Musa. You can't talk about Shakespeare unless you teach us about Ptahhotep. I don't want to hear the word Einstein unless I know the name Imhotep. Right? That is when, as individuals, we start doing something different. So, for me, you know, I was born and raised in the U.S. I came to Ghana just to be able to do this type of thing because I see huge opportunities. Each one of you will be a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, or whatever you happen to be. But because I've touched the lives and you have been told now the responsibility is on you to do for yourself. Nana Yao has told you some things. Mr. Andemariam flew thousands of miles just to be able to expose you to these things. Now you had along that I get the sign, oh, more Africa. Right? But he flew thousands of miles just so you can see faces that you otherwise would never see. So you can see places that otherwise perhaps you would never go to. So for us, we think this is very important work that's aligned with our destiny and the reason why we're here on the planet Earth. Right? So, you know, we, within our sphere of influence and what we can have influence over, we make those changes. If I can change the Institute of African Studies slides, I change the slides. which I changed the slide. If I say, you know what, I'll just give you a copy of the slides, but I'm going to write middle lecture on the board. That's not in the slides, but you need to know how to read and write. Then I'll do that. You see, even Nana Yabi was going through the slides, he's like, this guy isn't going to go through all the slides. You won't go. But I say there's something important that you need to know. So everything I think that's important that I can fit into 3 weeks, that's what I'll do. So I think we are going to come to a close. This is my last week with you all. Some people just want to do grades. That's it. But I'm here, room 115. I'm not going anywhere. Even if they kick me out, I'll still be sitting outside of room 115 to be here for the students. Can we get access to the videos, students?
Yeah, the videos will be available on this line. You can find the page or show them. Yeah, that's what we do. Yeah, there's those two videos.
Somebody wants to ask a question.
About the second video on Uhuru Kenyatta, that after he was elected as the president, people petitioned against that there was a fault with the election. But we saw in the video that I don't know if he's an investigator, the one who was talking, he visited different countries to find solutions to it. But at the end of the day, the woman who spoke said that they couldn't do anything because they have already elected if they call the results of the election. Does it always cut across like that? Like it cuts across, anything can be done after the results have been.
So this is a very good question, and I think we'll close out with this. So she was asking, okay, Uhuru Kenyatta was elected, now we can't do anything to him. One thing that was a very important point to this, you had the Westgate bombings in which our Ghanaian poet Kofi Awono was killed amongst many, many others, Kenyans and others. That this now became framed in terms of the war on terror. So the United States says that they don't have permanent allies, they only have permanent interests, right? So now he can be used as a pawn in this war on terror that is getting them billions and billions in terms of their war, defense budget, all of these things. So again, the United States can look at these things and say, you know what, we need to make some of these things go away because he can be used as a pawn. But then look at what the same United States did with Kwame Nkrumah, where they have the CIA stationed here in Accra. They said we need to get the people to think that they're going to do a coup. We will engineer, we will manipulate, we will destroy their economy so they'll blame Kwame Nkrumah, and then our interests are served, right? So again, we need to think about things in the broader context. Sometimes we look at Ghana as sort of like how a student at JHS looks at the headmaster and say, oh, that's as high as it goes. You don't see all of the things, the Ministry of Education and so forth and so on. So I think we need to understand things that are going on internally, where you say the lights go off and you say, Ya Mahama. But how many people say, Ya World Bank, Ya IMF, right? So these are internal and external dynamics. If you only look at the internal, you will blame each other and say, look at these bad Africans again. But if you can look at the interdynamic relationship between the two, then you can actually have some type of critical analysis and understanding of what's going on, right? Who benefits when you have doomsday every day and now they have to privatize ECG and sell it off to the lowest bidder, who happens to be cousin of the World Bank and IMF? When they have to sell Ghana Telecom to Vodafone, oh, you need to privatize and sell it to my cousin right here, right? So I think that once we can understand the internal and external, we can go beyond the Ya Mahama and the buck stops with the president to understand Why are certain presidents, even if they are torturing, killing, whatever, they can stay there 30, 40 years, as long as they are a pawn to who they need to be a pawn to? Whereas you have Thomas Sankara, you have Kwame Nkrumah, you have Patrice Lumumba, you say, Patrice, we have to get him out now. What's the difference? Are they really concerned about atrocities? Or are they concerned about what their interests are? Right? Just put some level of analysis on history and just don't go with whatever they're spoon feeding with you. The line needs to tell their own historian. Right? Okay.
So that's all for this evening. We hope to see, and those of you who went for church in the seminar rooms, please don't leave them here. Send them to their respective locations, seminar 1, seminar 2. So we hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. And this will be a tutorial. The Wednesday class, I'll link up with the course shop and then we'll let you know what we do before you write your IE, okay? All the best.
Abu. 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 Mama Kwama. Ekabo. Karibuni. Wahele ni atu. Wezo.
You.
Excellent. Welcome. I think we got full coverage on the last one. I would like to welcome you to the Black History Month Film Festival as part of the larger African World Documentary Film Festival. Today we are pleased to have an amazing, oh I shouldn't say amazing, a black-mazing, black-tastic, blacknificent, spectacular, black-horrific lineup of films, documentaries today. So what we will do, we'll start off with In the Shadow of Ebola. Has anyone here heard of Ebola? Right. At one point in time, not too long ago, conferences that were supposed to be scheduled here in Africa didn't happen. And people who are living here were running away to go to the US to run away from Ebola, right? Now there's Zika virus, and I wonder if those same people are going to run from America to come here. You never know. All right, so In the Shadow of Ebola, we are also going to show a documentary on Ferguson. And we also have our discussant from today, Mr. Ephraim Andemariam, who teaches at University of Missouri St. Louis, just a few miles away from Ferguson, right? So he'll be able to give a very in-depth view of what is going on the ground at Ferguson, right? And this is in the larger context of the Black Lives Matter movement, and even in the larger context of the ongoing genocide against African people throughout the world, right? From there, we're going to look at the march, right? And this is dealing with the March on Washington. We'll be able to see the documentary for that. And we'll close out with the race documentary series. And these are short documentaries, and it should segue directly into our discussion that we will have today. So is everyone excited? Yes. Oh, sorry. Is everyone black-sighted? Yes. For our Black History Month Film Festival, we're here, we keep it blacker than 1,000 midnights. You ready? I shouldn't say ready. Black Eddie? Yeah! All right, Mr. Andemariam, would you say a few words to kick us off, and then we'll go straight into the film?
Good afternoon. I'm not as charismatic as Dr. Cambon here, so don't expect something amazing coming from someone from Missouri. So, anyway, my name is Ephraim Andemariam. I'm from the University of Missouri St. Louis, part of the African World Documentary Film Festival. festival started in 2007 at our university in Missouri. I know some of you know where Missouri is, I hope. Anybody doesn't have any idea about where Missouri is? Do you know where Missouri is? Okay, that's a nice way to say it. Raise your hand and say, I don't know. Nice. Well, Missouri is in Midwest America, so the nearest town to our city, St. Louis, is Chicago. So if you have Chicago in your mind, at least we are 4 hours from Chicago, but we are in the center of America, so we are the forgotten one. Everybody knows New York and LA, and we are just in the middle of nowhere. But that's why we started the film festival, because we want Missouri to be important. We want Missouri to be a significant contributor, especially in the Black history movement, because our state is also predominantly, not predominantly, but we have a significant number of Black communities in our community. So we started in 2007 with the idea of teaching about Black history, Black culture, and Black politics. But this is not purely an African film. Actually, this film suggests that it's also not only about African, it's about the Black diaspora. So it's about the African experience all around the world. So films which deals with the African experience from the Caribbean, the Latin American world, Asia, Australia, Africa, America, Canada, whatever you name it. If it talks about the lives of the Black people, then we are the festival. And what makes us so unique is it's not a festival which shows in one place and that's the end of it. Like most festivals, but it travels all around the world. We have 10 venues, and we are so excited to be part of the partnership with the University of Ghana, the Institute of African Studies. This is our second year running, and we hope you will invite us back. Next year I'll come up with a lot of phrases about Black state, all those things. That way at least I will be charismatic. So this is our 9th year running, and after this the festival will travel to Barbados, then we'll go back to Nigeria, we'll come back to Nigeria. So if you miss one film, you can meet me in Lagos. If you come to Lagos, I will cover your lunch. How about that? That's a deal. Just make your way to Lagos. Then we'll take it to back to the Caribbean, our new partner in Trinidad and Tobago. Then we'll go back to America, a couple of places, before finalizing in London and Jamaica, and South Africa also. So it's a year-long process. I don't travel to all these places, so don't get jealous of my job. I sometimes stay back. So, but I'm so honored and privileged to be in Ghana. This is my first time in Ghana in my constituency. So I'm excited. So far, so good. I'm really, really happy to be here. Nice people, soft-spoken people, just like me. I'm originally from East Africa, so I thought we were the only ones soft-spoken people until I came to Ghana and realized that we are not the only ones. So it's a nice place to be. And once again, I would just encourage you to watch the films, enjoy the films, but most importantly, engage in the discussion afterward. That's what the whole film is all about, so that you can learn from these films and you can see what Ferguson is all about, or the other conversation on race, but again, we can relate it to our experience elsewhere. All of us have experience. Could be ethnic, could be religious, but I think it kind of applies to this. So hopefully that will ignite a lot of discussion, and I'm happy to answer some of your questions. Professor Kambon is here, everybody, to answer some others. So it's not about Q&A, it's more about sharing our experiences and knowledge. So enjoy the film, and thank you so much.
All right, with no further ado, I present the first film, In the Shadow of Ebola. Ago. 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 All right. I'm very pleased at the turnout today. We have a very good group here. Some of you I noticed, I see faces that are recognized by students from UGRC. We also have discussants. We have Ephraim Andemariam from University of Missouri St. Louis, also Dr. Nabi Neg from right here at the University of Ghana. And I think I will invite them up. Mr. Andemariam, Dr. Nabi Neg. Now, Mr. Under Miriam, as you know, we talked about Ferguson, and we mentioned that he comes from University of Missouri, St. Louis, by way of Ethiopia, of course. So he will be able to give a very, in-depth view from the ground. Also, Dr. Nabigne is in my same section, language, literature, and drama, and brings a very deep well of knowledge and a very interesting perspective to some of these issues. So, with no further ado, I'll turn it over to them as our tag team MCs.
I guess this is the Ghanaian way of giving a guest privilege, but I appreciate that. Well, I don't have to introduce myself again. I'm Efraim Maya, for those of you who came late. So, as I said earlier, I would rather have a conversation than a lecture, because I'm not definitely an expert on Ferguson or race to be lecturing you on anything. But I'm sure that all of you have some questions. So I'm going to give you a couple of pointers on Ferguson especially because of the topic being Ferguson being very close to my university, and I was kind of, I wouldn't call it privileged, but I was kind of close by to witness and see the developments since 2014. And also as a scholar to also keep an eye on it and how it has gone up and down and what it brought to the overall conversation when it comes to race in America. But Ferguson is not, the reason Ferguson is important is not because it's the first riot of, I don't like to call it riot, but the first protest by black people or by any group in America, but Ferguson brought something new to the forefront. Ferguson brought a new kind of activism in America. Ferguson is now associated with this new movement going on all around America, including the Black Lives Matter. I know Black Lives Matter started a little bit earlier in Florida after Trayvon Martin's killing, but again, Ferguson gave them that extra impetus to become national. But again, we can also discuss about that. If you have a question, I will try to answer any question you have on that. So the film more or less was done, I think, 3 weeks ago. The filmmaker Carla Usher came to St. Louis, and I had the privilege to meet her and talk to her. She went to Ferguson 3 weeks after the riots and the protest started. So it kind of, some of the views you heard on the film is actually people talking about their experience, but also in retrospect. So there is that kind of gap of 3 weeks for her. But we were there from day one. To be honest with you, none of us expected this to. We kind of sense, especially those in academia, because we have a lot of students from Ferguson in our school, we kind of sense that there is tension in that part of area, but also not only Ferguson, but other parts of St. Louis. But nobody expects Ferguson to be that igniting factor to bring this national debate into the forefront. I'm glad, in a way, that the debate came forward, so that because we need to have that debate. We cannot hide behind race being a taboo which we don't want to touch. I think race has to come forward because it's already there in our forefront. Since especially, it's been there always, but since 2008, since Barack Obama came to power, you can see that every day, in everyday life. And to give you some perspective from St. Louis, I think Ferguson is not a ghetto. It's not even the city. It's a suburb. Like I guess Lego is a little bit outside Ghana suburb. It's kind of that. The population in Ferguson is kind of mixed in a way. It's about 1/3, about 21,000 population, 1/3 Caucasian, about 2/3 African American. So you go to Ferguson, the reason African Americans prefer to go to Ferguson is simple, in my calculation. Nice houses, very good size, big houses, which we all love. I think this is, I guess, a common trait in everybody, but again, as African American, as black people, we love big houses. And Ferguson provides those big houses. But the interesting part about Ferguson is that, as one of the guys was mentioning, since a lot of people from Ferguson, especially white people, fly to what we call St. Charles County, which is about I would say 20 miles away, there was an opening for black people to actually purchase the houses for cheaper price. So big house and a relatively cheaper price. So it's perfect, a nice neighborhood. You would never guess, you go to Ferguson, you would never guess this is a place where the protest started. So I want you to have that idea. It's not like we are talking about a ghetto where people were always angry, didn't have job. No, this is a very lower middle class environment. So a nice neighborhood. So that's what makes it also so interesting. The drive actually came from this kind of neighborhood. The other thing we need to keep in mind when we talk about Ferguson is what brought this anger to the forefront. And I want to actually bring it down to 3 issues so that the discussion could go around that. One is, of course, the racial issue, which is the institutional discrimination, which is very prevalent in those kind of small city like Ferguson. And the second one is the relationship between the police in one hand and especially the black community. It could also be like Hispanic community when you go to places like Harlem or Little Harlem or anywhere in other part of the America. But again, in that particular region, what we need to focus is that the relationship between police and the community. Was it really mutually respectful relationship? No, because in Ferguson it's clear. Out of the 52 police officers, only 3 were black police officers. Only 3. 48 was black officers were white in a community which is 2/3 black. So that means this police officer were not communicating with this police, with the community. They were not going and having conversation with them. I live in a neighborhood called Maryland Heights. Again, predominantly white, but again you can see the police is more or less mixed. But again, I can see the policemen in my neighborhood coming with their firefighters coming to my neighborhood with fire truck. So kids can play with them, we can interact. So there is that kind of mutually respectful relationship. I don't think that was the case in Ferguson, because the city used the majority black people there as a source of income. Because you could be stopped for minor traffic violation, and that's how the city really generates its income. It became the second generator of income for the city. Stopping black people and charging them money for every little offense. So there is that systematic way of decline of relationship between the people. Then the third one, which happens after the protest started, is which all of us were kind of shocked, was the militarization of the police force. Nobody knew that Ferguson had all these armies kind of militarized. What do you call it in the military terms? Vehicles which are basically for Iraqi war. These are sold for the police department by the State by Pentagon, and this kind of small cities, which claim to be poor cities, managed to buy it. All of a sudden, we see this kind of armored car in the cities, in the streets, and people were being, they were officially protesting, peacefully protesting, which the Constitution allowed them to do so, but then all of a sudden they were being beaten, pushed by, but most importantly, it becomes more of a military might against innocent civilians trying to exercise their right. So bring these 3 things into perspective when we discuss about it. Because the last thing also kind of bring us back together from different perspectives. We have heard from the police officers, we have heard from women, young kids, and parents how they felt about it. That shouldn't be the case in America. Parents should not be worried about their kids going out. We shouldn't be talking to our teenagers about, please don't confront with a policeman. Please. It's, as I said, I can share to some extent. We don't want to say that to your kids. The first thing you want to teach them when they are 15, 16, 17, it should not be that. It should be about how they should date, what they should protect themselves when they are dating. I mean, a 16-year-old, imagine yourself, a few years back. I know most of you are in that age group. It's not about how you're going to deal with a policeman. So again, keep that in mind, and I will give the floor to the next person.
Gladly, the speech has been given, so I'll save you speeches from me. The one thing that I noticed threading through all that we watched today is that sense of helplessness to do anything about a situation that you find yourself in, be it a disease, racism, police brutality. You seem to be shackled, unable to move, unable to do anything to free yourself. And that is the one thread that I find going through all of these films that we watched today. I've been lucky at having experienced racism, but I knew enough about it to be very, very afraid when I drove with my family from South Carolina to Florida. All I prayed for was, please, please, please don't let the police stop me on the way. I was that scared, even though I had to be the man and do the driving. But anytime I saw a police patrol car stopped at the roadside there, I said 3 prayers before we could pass. Don't let the police pull me over. I just wouldn't know what to do. Not that I was doing anything illegal, but I had read enough about police brutality. I heard enough about people being brutalized just for being the color that I wear. Enough to frighten me, not to even want to do the driving. Actually, from Florida, I said, I told my wife, why don't we ship this car and then take a flight back to South Carolina? I just didn't want to drive back to South Carolina. And that's as much as I know of racism. Happily, I didn't have to be stopped by police. And, well, nobody has confronted me about my color, except probably a few months ago in Kazakhstan, where everybody wanted to take a picture with me. Just because I was black, and I was with my colleague, Dr. Nidoke, and we felt so uncomfortable. So we actually complained to the conference, why is everybody wanting to take pictures with us? Are we that different? Why? I said, oh, don't worry, just that they are not used to blacks. I suppose the whites feel the same way here when all the Ghanaian children ran after them. So now I have made my speech. I'll let you do all your speaking too, because I know you have a lot of comments to make from your own experiences on what has happened in the homes here. Yeah, thank you.
Speak up, please. Don't do that Ghanaian voice.
In the documentary, the gentleman mentioned, they also mentioned that there are only 3 black men out of the 52 Ferguson police officers. I want to know, is it a case of discrimination that they are not hiring black police officers, or the black community that are apathetic to being part of the police force? What caused that large disparity when the community is to get black?
Okay, or shall we take a couple of them and then see what we can do? Any other? We have just about 30 minutes of discussion, so a couple of comments or questions before we ask them to answer.
Thank you, Chief. And I'd like to ask a question based on the Ferguson police brutality case too. And back then, after the whole documentary was over, as I was reading, I realized that the case of the police officer being thrown out of the court was because of the lack of evidence. But then, from the little I know from movies I watch, I know there are a lot of security cameras, a lot of traffic cameras over there in America. I doubt there wouldn't be any in Ferguson. So how come they couldn't get any evidence to continue with that case?
Okay, one more at the back there, and then we will answer.
Good evening. I have a question. So, watching Ferguson, a few of the commentators in the documentary actually predicted that the cop was going to get away with what he had done. And true to their word, a few months later, the courts, the jury passed a verdict that he couldn't be tried, right? There was no indictment. The same thing happened in the case of Tamil Rice, the 12-year-old black boy who had a toy gun and was shot by a cop. Same thing happened to Eric Garner. Same thing happened to Trayvon Martin. And I imagine there are many others that we don't hear about. Now, what is it about the judiciary in the USA that makes it to justify by their actions, by not indicting these murders? All right? What exactly is in their judiciary? If somebody can help me out. That makes it so predictable that if a white person, especially a white cop, kills a black person, it's very likely, it's predictable that the verdict is going to be what we all know it to be.
Well, I think these are very pertinent questions. If I get it right, I think one of the questions is why is the police force predominantly white in a community which is majority black? And your question is quite pertinent in a sense that is this the issue of black people don't want to be policemen, or is this is there a systematic way that black people are excluded from being policemen? I think there is a little bit of both. But again, from a black people's perspective, I think when you don't trust an institution, when you see an institution since childhood as a way of oppression, a mechanism that can oppress you, a mechanism that kind of push you aside from the overall picture, you don't want to be part of that. That's one. I mean, young kids, you ask them what they want to be. I mean, I grew up in Ethiopia, as I said. One of the things every kid used to say was, I want to be a policeman. I was because, you think, I mean, again, I grew up in a very military dictatorship period where policemen and military was always kind of frowned upon. But despite that, there was some sort of respect for the police. It's as if they are the protector of the community. So kids would be asked, and they would love to say that I want to be a policeman. And you can see this in our schools also. When we go to some schools, predominantly white schools, I mean, policeman is one of the jobs they want to be. You go to the inner city schools, that's something which you never hear any of those kids mention, being policemen. They would rather say, I would love to join the army. So there is that fear that this is an institution which doesn't really represent me. Why would I be there? Now, there are some conscious kids or family who are going to say, maybe I will be part of this structure so that I can change it from the inside. You have heard a couple of the police officers, black police officers, coming from that kind of environment. Okay, I have seen policemen have authority, so if I have that authority, if I have that power, maybe I can do good. But once you are in the system, you know that you have no power to change anything because the structure is so rigid that, as the man says, if you go against that structure, that system, you're done. Nobody's going to back you up. So you end up being just a doorman there, quiet. You just do your job, feed your family, you move on. It's a job, it becomes a job instead of serving. So there is an element of not wanting to pursue this profession as profession because this is not something which you believe. And then, of course, the overall criminal justice system in America, which is very corrupt, in my opinion, has already biased against black people. So before you are 18, you already have a criminal record. For petty, for petty things. I'm not completely trying to clear black people from doing bad. I mean, we do have elements within our community who does something bad. Just like everybody has that. But again, it's much easier for those black kids like Michael Brown to be picked up easily. Now, once you have that criminal record, forget about policing. forget about joining those. So there is that fear, that element which will protect you or which will stop you from even applying for the job. Because it's already, you feel that it's already a racially biased institute. You don't want to be policeman because you don't, I wouldn't say like them, but you have this fear about policemen. Then also, you always are worried about, oh, the fight I had with my friend when I was 16, was it reported? You don't even know that it was reported. If you have money, you can hire lawyers and make sure that it is clear. I will give you a very simple, very effective example. If a policeman catches you in America, if you are speeding, which I'm guilty, I was caught once or twice. Simple thing, you don't have to pay the fines and get a point on your driving license. All you have to do is go to a traffic lawyer and they will convert it into a parking violation. You pay a little bit more, I will tell you that. Instead of $95, maybe you will end up paying $200. But that violation of speeding can easily, through money, be changed into a parking violation, which means I don't get a point on my driving license. So that shows you that the system, there is something seriously wrong with the system. Now, a black man caught speeding, economically not able to do this kind of things. He can't even manage to pay the $95. Where is he going to get the money to pay the $250 for a lawyer? So what will happen is he will have that record in his driving license. It's not even criminal, but when he's going to be hired for a policeman and other jobs, they are going to see, do you have any record in your driving license? It's an issue. When I'm hired at the university as a coordinator, I was asked if my driving license is clear. What's got to do with my teaching, my coordinating of a program? I don't even use the university vehicle. But again, it's one way to stop you from advancing. So again, this is not been researched or anything. It has been research which shows you all this and others. So I'm just picking snips from here and there. So it's a system is so kind of twisted that you just, as a black man, as a young black man, an 18-year-old, 19-year-old who can easily join a policeman, who say, no, I would rather join the army because it's less of a hassle. Your criminal record is not of a big deal. If it's especially a time of Iraq war, if it's a time of the Vietnamese war, yeah, you will go, don't worry. But policeman, that's a different story. That's one thing. So the other question the young man asked here was, just refresh me. The blue shirt.
Why do policemen get away with it?
Oh, that's the last question I know. No, what was your question? Okay, fine, then I answer. So now I'm trying to avoid your question because it's so tough. Because I'm not a lawyer by profession, so it's a really hard question to answer. You're right. Everybody knew that there was going to be no indictment. There was no debate, to be honest with you. There were those of us who were very idealistic, who still believed that maybe the prosecutor was going to push hard so that this became like a case where a policeman who murdered a young man could be, tried in the court of law so that others could learn from this experience. But everybody, including all my colleagues who lived in St. Louis, Missouri and other places for so long, told me that that's not going to be the case. This guy is going to be freed, no indictment. That was the fear. And the fear was about him not indicted, but again, what would happen after that? Even the government was so worried that they called the National Guard to come to St. Louis in force before the indictment was read. The funny and the sad part is, all these National Guards were never seen in Ferguson. They were never in Ferguson. They came for Ferguson, but they were never in Ferguson. They were in Clayton, which is the government center, where the banks are, where the money is. They were there. So that evening when Ferguson was going against all that riot, another demonstration, fire and everything, none of the National Guards were there. So that tells you something about the system. The system was there to protect the rich. Ferguson is a poor neighborhood. Remember that. It doesn't matter whether it's black, white. It's a poor neighborhood. It's not a scary neighborhood. I mean, I go there quite often. It's a nice neighborhood, to be honest with you, but it's a poor neighborhood. Now, coming down to your question, though, I think it boils down to the American criminal justice system. Who is prosecuting the police officers? The prosecutor office. The prosecutor office actually work closely with the police officers and the police commissioner in bringing some sort of system in the country, in the states. And this is a federal structure. So when you have two institutions which work close side by side, now one is trying to try the other one, it's not going to happen. When you have that independent prosecutor in one office, in our case, the guy was actually, his dad was a police officer who was shot by a black man, the prosecutor. When he was young, his dad was actually shot and killed by a black man. So he was already biased. This is a democratic elected prosecutor. I think that's the false hope people had. At least he's a democratically elected one. He's from a democratic party. He kind of sympathizes with black issues. No. He brought, I think, in my opinion, he had already bias toward one ethnic group over the other. Yeah, the case was clear. There was evidence, yes. But again, there was also so many evidence that disproved those evidences, unfortunately. A lot of people say stuff. I guess maybe the media attention kind of twist them, but they say stuff which later on was proved wrong. And that's what they used to not indict them. Because all you need is just one false information or one false indictment. That's it. That's all they did. So they didn't go into all evidences. They just needed one evidence that can disprove everything. And those evidences were there, unfortunately. So I think one of the young men in this race op-ed mentioned, the moment you're shot as a black man in America, the first thing they do is find into your criminal record. They will find your, so before you are even proved guilty or innocent, which the Constitution dictates that you should be, that's how it should be, you're already found guilty by the media. That's what happened with Eric Gardner, that's what happened with Michael Brown, that's what happened. Even Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old, they were trying to find him guilty. A 12-year-old in Ohio, a state which allows open carry arm. A state where a lot of white people carry their armed semi-automatic weapon 200 yards from a school because that's their constitutional right. But a 12-year-old kid with a toy gun shot in 2 seconds. He didn't even ask him he didn't even ask him to drop it. He just came, stopped the car, and shot him. That's all. If it was other states, you could say, okay, he was wrong because he thought it was a gun. This is a state which allows open carry on. So it tells you a lot. I don't know if I really do answer your question, but maybe I just went around it.
Well, Eric, just remember the proverb, in the court of owls, the cockroach has no justice. Yeah, Dr. Kambon.
Dr. Kambon is going to say something.
I was going to cite that exact same proverb. I was also going to cite that no matter how
most of our students were really, really active in the demonstrations, in the rallies, and everything. As far as the university administration is concerned, the university administration, in my opinion, took the opportunity very well because this is a state university very close to Ferguson, so whenever we have the governor coming to St. Louis, which is in another city, whenever he comes to St. Louis, he used the university forum to make a speech and everything. That means a lot of media was coming to the university. So from the administrative point of view, I used to work as a PR, so I understand what they were trying to do. They took this fully to their advantage. So all of a sudden, kids from Ferguson or the student, especially colored student in the university, was kind of given a little bit more elevation when it comes to attention. So all of a sudden, big companies were coming, financial companies giving scholarship here and there for Ferguson students. Now, because of that, did we have a lot more increment in our student enrollment, especially from Ferguson? No, we didn't. I'll tell you, right now, our enrollment is so low that the university is struggling financially. The reason is simple. Most of our students are commuting students, unlike what we have here. They work and they go to school. We do have staying students, but the majority are commuting students. Most of our students come from the community college. So they do the 2 years community college in St. Louis area because it's cheaper and you can actually do some of the courses there for less. I mean, as you know, America is the most expensive place for education. No question about it. You guys, I know you pay here. Probably it's expensive. You might think it's expensive. I don't know exactly, but as a student, you probably think it's expensive. But America, you have heard it. It's a lifelong commitment. Once you have that student loan, that's it. All your life you're going to pay. So we actually are working so that we can have a job so that we can pay the student loan. As simple as that. So coming back to your question, of course, the enrollment is so low because most of our students were coming from the community college and the grades for you to enter the university from community college was relatively lower. Now they said, no, we want more quality students, so they raised that GPA, and all of a sudden, none of them are coming. So we still have a problem. Now the question is, where's all that scholarship money which was given by these big multinational corporations going? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. On a personal note, is my program affected or benefited from Ferguson as an African and African American program in the university, which I run? You should say, I mean, Ferguson should bring me to the forefront. Ferguson should give me that much more highlight so that this is the program everybody wants to support. On the contrary, Ferguson actually took away the limelight from us, and all of a sudden everybody is fighting for the limelight. But history is saying that, oh, we do give this kind of course, political science wants to do this course. So practically the African American course, which were supposed to be much more about this kind of issue because we are learning about the history of Africa, the history of African American people, not which starts from the enslavement period, no, but beyond enslavement, way before enslavement. Before these people were forcefully coming to America, that's what we were teaching. It's kind of stay there. So everybody, so it becomes a blessing in disguise for some. For us, it was not a good thing. So it's a mixed feeling. I have a mixed feeling about from our perspective. But again, the issue is much more bigger than my department. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Moses. My name is Moses Asante. Moses Asante. From the documentaries, the problem that black people face in the States is racism. And from Dr. Francis Wilson's speech, the white face genetic annihilation. In their quest for genetic survival, they practice racism on black people. And we can see that there is mass incarceration of black people. There is the killing of black people all over. Now, from Dr. Campbell's experience, he realized repatriation is the way, and he finds himself today here in Africa to escape the racism that exists in America. My question is, what role has repatriation got to play in dealing with global or dealing with racism as a whole in general? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've been thinking while sitting down here, some of us actually don't want to go abroad for one reason or the other. But apart from that, we do get scholarships from there. At times we get job opportunities from there. We apply and we get them. But why is it that when we go there and certain issues come up, we find it very difficult to defend us? And I've been thinking, is it that we want some of our ideas and knowledge before we're being kicked out? Because I myself am being confused.
Thank you so much. I'm sad this evening, and in 1900, the Pan-African Congress that was organized by Henry Sylvester Williams, Du Bois made an important speech, and that was in the 19th century, the 20th century, and he said the problem of the 20th century was the problem of the color line, talking about racism. I'm sure if he had a vision, he would have said still in the 21st century there was going to be the problem of the color line. Malcolm X, the same way that Martin Luther King was assassinated, he follows suit in that same manner. The question I want to ask is, now we know the American judicial system, we know how African Americans are suffering, and we know the system is invariably so partially oriented. What is the way forward? What are African Americans supposed to do? Now, when Obama came into power, so many of us thought that, we had an African American in power, so the situation was going to be quite different. But it appears the situation has gotten worse. And to add salt to injury, we have an American running for president, and the rhetoric of this man is inciting hatred. What are African Americans supposed to do? What is the way forward? Now that you know the system is partially oriented against us, what are we supposed to do as African Americans? Thank you.
First on repatriation, and then what would you do as an African American? Well, I suppose now you say you are African.
I actually refer to myself as African anti-American. And I'm trying to get that officially stamped and get a passport that says so. I actually wanted to share a few things that go along with this. Now, this is a quote from Malcolm X, and he says, "No matter where the black man is, he will never be respected until Africa is a world power," right? So this again comes to the idea of repatriation, that's not now magically we're okay, because you see what they did to Nkrumah here, you see what they did to Lumumba here, you see what they did to Thomas Sankara here. I gave the quote yesterday where the CIA said, yes, we're the ones who were responsible for overthrowing Kwame Nkrumah. So that was that part. This is another quote from Kwame Nkrumah. "No African will be free until all Africans are free." This is including Africans still in the United States of America. Now this is another quote from Malcolm X. You see, I like to bring my ancestors in the room. Consider this a verbal libation. So he says, "Our problems are your problems. We have lived for over 300 years in that American den of racist wolves, in constant fear of losing life and limb. Recently, 3 students from Kenya were mistaken for American Negroes and were brutally beaten by the New York police. Shortly after that, 2 diplomats from Uganda were also beaten by the New York City police, who mistook them for American Negroes. If Africans are brutally beaten while only visiting in America, imagine the physical and psychological suffering received by your brothers and sisters who have lived there for over 300 years. Our problem is your problem. No matter how much independence Africans get here on the mother continent, unless you wear your national dress all the time when you visit America, you may be mistaken for one of us and suffer the same psychological and physical mutilation that is an everyday occurrence in our lives. Your problems will never be fully solved until and unless ours are solved. You will never be fully respected until and unless we are also respected. You will never be recognized as free human beings until and unless we are also recognized and treated as human beings. Our problem is your problem. It is not a Negro problem nor an American problem. This is a world problem, a problem for humanity. It is not a problem of civil rights, it is a problem of human rights. So this is coming back first to this. Now in terms of the way forward and the solution, I will go back to 1892, right? Ida B. Wells, who was part of the original Black Lives Matter movement in the anti-lynching campaign, right? People think about this as a new thing on social media just because they don't have a historical perspective. So she says, of the many inhuman outrages of this present year, the only case where the proposed lynching did not occur was where the men armed themselves in Jacksonville, Florida, and Paducah, Kentucky, and prevented it. The only times an Afro-American who was assaulted got away has been when he had a gun and used it in self-defense. The lesson this teaches, in which every Afro-American should ponder well, is that a Winchester rifle should have a place of honor in every black home, and it should be used for that protection which the law refuses to give. When the white man, who is always the aggressor, knows he runs as great a risk of biting the dust every time his Afro-American victim does, he will have greater respect for Afro-American life. The more the Afro-American yields and cringes and begs, the more he has to do so, the more he is insulted, outraged, and lynched. So again, when we talk about the global static interlocking system of white world terror domination, also called white supremacy, you realize that there is really no refuge. There are only just different places, different temperatures of heat in this global kitchen, right? Now in terms of the solution, these are solutions that were given over 100 years ago. What actually worked when they were trying to kill us? And what showed that we really believe that Black Lives Matter were when we were able to show them that our lives matter. You come for us, you lose too, right?
Shall we take one final round of questions? But we were expecting some comments on the film, not just questions. People's personal uptake on what you have watched.
Okay, from what we have watched so far, in the first video, in the shadow of Ebola, when the outbreak started, what's his name? The narrator wanted to take his family from Liberia, no other country in Africa but to the States. So I feel if the African Americans are this threatened, they should have a safe haven to come to. And obviously that place should be Africa, but it doesn't look that way. Because if they want to run from some things like that, they'll be run to a different state in America, but not to Africa. So it's partly a responsibility of Africans as a whole to create the continent as a very safe place for them to come to in case of these life-threatening happenings. Thank you.
Another comment right here.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Ashley Niashali. Mine is also a comment. In the No Jim Crow, it's a book. The author spells out in an astonishing clarity how there are more black men in correctional, so-called correctional facilities than there are actually grains of sand in the Sahara Desert. It all revolves around this issue of, there's a concept in psychology called learned helplessness. And the brief explanation is, if you are locked up in this room and then you make attempts to get out and you are unable to get out, for several attempts you begin to feel helpless, and after so many attempts you just accept that there is no way you can get out of this room. This is some sort of psychological warfare I think the system running this world is playing on black people. I wouldn't say black American, because all black people, I feel, in my opinion, are threatened. Somewhere in 1807, Britain signed an act illegal documents that made slavery illegal. And people like Granville Sharp and William Wilberforce forwarded those things. But you see, 200 years down the lane, the black man is still not free. And the big question is why? And I find the answer to lie in a concept I call apathy or indifference. See, we are too unconcerned. And family home, are you my father's brother? Is it my father's property? These are some of the things that have put us in a situation where we find ourselves. Let's not throw all the blames to the white people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. To add to what my brother over there said, I believe that this whole issue of racism and problem with the white, I strongly believe that Africans, we are responsible for our own problems, and we shouldn't be blaming the whites that much for what we have caused for ourselves. How can someone who fought, with his whole life to gain independence for a country, not a country, but was actually fighting for the independence of a whole continent, could be overthrown just by some few set of, selfish and self-centered entities. So I strongly believe that until we learn to think about our brothers, this issue of racism is never going to end. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I believe in the fact that we are still being colonized. In fact, colonization is still not over. Because right now we have something called new colonialism. We can start from diseases that have been, we have actually used as lab rats. Look at HIV1, HIV2, look at Ebola, and look at Zika virus. If you go into the mainframe of how these diseases came about, they were actually manufactured in the lab. And all these things were just to use them on blacks as if it was like a biological warfare. So my question is, how exactly do we get out of this new colonialism? How do we do it a bit very fast? Because if you get to a time, very soon the blacks will wipe out.
I would like to add on in the shadow of the border. At times we don't have cases that need soft attention. Like when they announced the curfew on the quarantine, they're meant to go on it softly, but I saw in the video shooting a poor kid, and at the end of the day he died. So it's not us about blaming other people, it's about blaming ourselves. How do we handle critical issues in Africa here? I can still remember in December last year in Enugu State, when a truck fell down and more than 150 people lost their lives. Someone actually committed suicide. And in the process of committing suicide, people were there. Instead of saving, they were taking pictures. And I was so confused. And when they remembered to help him was when he died. And they just brought him down from the roof and they still had the pictures. So at times, we're not meant to blame other people for our problems. We're meant to blame ourselves. Because at times, we're the cause of our own problems. We have little problems and we take them to the extreme. Thank you.
I thought I would hear more about in the shadow of Ebola, because you all were here when it happened. You all saw the reaction of Ghanaians when the president decided that a center should be established in Ghana to help our neighbors deal with Ebola. How did you feel? Those are the sort of comments I thought you would make. Did you agree with the president for that center to be set up in Ghana when we hadn't yet had any case? Did you feel threatened? Did you feel that, look, this is a problem with Liberia, let them deal with their problem, it has nothing to do with us? How did you feel? Was your neighbor's problem your problem, or it was something to do with your neighbors? They fought their war, let them fight this one.
Good question.
Ago. 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 Memamwajo. Yeshie. Kie. Eko leo. Nako gudigi. Habari za siku. Good evening. Okay, no problem. All right, I welcome you all to our penultimate edition of our Black History Month Film Festival, where we keep it blacker than 1,000 midnights. We keep it blacker than black. We keep it blacktastic, blacknificent, blackerific, spectacular. All right. So here today we have two very exciting, black exciting films for you. The first one is entitled Her Story, or we may call it Herstory, as opposed to history. Herstory, right? Educate a woman and you educate a nation. And this is in a Ghanaian context, a sister who goes through the educational process. You'll be able to see her story, or her story. And second, we have another black sighting film on the art of Ama Ataedu, one of our luminaries, black luminaries. Yes, I like that. Right? So this is something that we should all be able to relate to and that we should all get some black inspiration from for our own lives of how we can do it and how we can make it, and Africans who have gone before and done blacktastic things. All right? I think I will invite Ephraim up, Mr. Andy Miriam, who traveled thousands of miles all the way from Missouri just to be able to show you these films so you can see these spaces, and places. All right, so Mr. Andy Miriam.
Thank you so much. Nice to see back some faces which I already saw the last few days. So that means we are making a stride here. Welcome back, guys. Those of you who have been here. For those of you who are new, this is your first time. You missed out 3 wonderful nights. So we can't go back. So we have one more tomorrow. So just make sure to be here tomorrow. My name is Ephraim Andumayam. I'm from the University of Missouri St. Louis. I'm the Africa and African American program coordinator there. So we run this program. One of the programs we run is the Africa World Documentary Film Festival. It's been running for 9 years. We started back in 2007. So no, don't do the mathematics. I know 2007 should not be 9 years, but it should be our 10th year. But we missed 1 year. But again, this is our 9th year running. And this is becoming an international film festival, traveling to 10 different venues. So Ghana is our first international stop, actually. So we are excited to start here in Ghana with a lot of history. And then we will take it to Nigeria, South Africa, here within the continent, and then Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, and Jamaica in the Caribbean. And we have also different venues within the United States. And we have one in Europe, which is London, UK. So it's an international film festival. The whole idea of this festival is to teach youngsters, students, mostly our campus students, but also the community about the history, culture of black people. So we're not talking about African, we are talking about the black diaspora at large. So people of African origin all around the world. Today's film, 2 of the films happen to be from Ghana, which is exciting. And it's about us, so you can relate easily to both of them. I mean, the second one about the illustrious Ama is a little bit different because you can learn, you can be proud of the achievements our Ghanaian sister have actually achieved. It's a big name, some of you might know, but the first film also gives you that indication that by educating women that we are actually educating a nation. So what does it mean? So hopefully you can relate, you can see yourself in that picture, either from the filmmaker's perspective or from the subject perspective. So hopefully by the end of the session, which we've been doing for the last 3 years, we will have a discussion. This is not my area, so I won't be leading this discussion. I think we have a very, very illustrious professor from here, a literature professor who is going to lead the discussion. So, but I want you to contribute. I want you to be part of this discussion. Put yourself in those young ladies which you are going to see. Put yourself in this illustrious Ama and what she achieved in Ghana, so that we can talk about it in much more broader sense. So enjoy the films. And I will once again invite you to come back tomorrow. So it's a closing day, so I would love to see most of you back. We have a film from Kenya, Muli. It's probably one of the best films I have seen in my film festival in 9 years. It's a very, very, very good film. So I really encourage you to come back tomorrow also to watch Muli. It's about an 80-minute film, 81-minute film, but really, really a good film to show us that we Africans can actually handle some of our own challenges, which unfortunately everybody assumes that there is a problem here, there is challenge here, but somebody has to come and solve it. No, the movie will show us that there is a way that we can solve it. And this is an uplifting film. So I want you to see that, learn from that, and then question yourself, what am I doing to change it? So today is much more about you guys. So I'm going to sit, learn from you guys. So teach me, please. So I expect you guys to give me comments. Not to give me, but to give the speaker comments, ideas, everything. I'm going to be sitting there and absorbing that. I want to go back home to say I learned a lot from Ghana. All right? Thank you so much, guys.
Welcome to our final set of discussions on this week of African film. Today we have had 2 films that speak to African womanhood and what it's possible to become. But I will leave the commentary to you. And by the way, my name is Isi Sadalandadi, and I work here in the Institute of African Studies. Yeah, so I'll leave you to make your comments. What do you feel? What do you think? The thing about literary things is that there's no right answer. So that's a wonderful thing. So everybody can say something. So let me open up the floor. How do you feel at this moment? What's going through your mind? Anybody? We won't be very long, so don't be frightened. We'll just, for those who want to go home. Yeah, any comments, please, about the 2 films? Yes, please, over there. Patrol.
Good evening. I'm Asewa, and I've been here since Monday, and just like the best, these 2 movies are like the best films I've ever watched, and then like it gives me the confidence, like I feel empowered, like as an African lady, or to go high, like nothing can stop me from achieving what I want to do, and I'm really glad I came, ready to go. Okay, yes, more comments.
More comments. How do you feel? What do you think? I need some gentlemen also to speak.
Good evening. My name is Colbert, and by my accent, I'm an African American, and visiting Ghana and was invited to this event, and very moved by the film. And one particular part that stood out to me was the comment she said about, I guess, Ghanaians' trepidation of African Americans. Just this reminder of slavery, this reminder of colonization. So for myself, I just want to kind of hear a little bit about that and if you could share your thoughts. Thank you. And this was magnificent. Thank you.
Right. Ghanaians' trepidation of the whole business of slavery and enslavement, you know, this is something that we have to talk about and don't talk about enough. There's a certain collective amnesia around the whole question of enslavement and how what is its current relevance. And one of the things that is very, very clear is that many people are like, you know, when they go to the African Americans go to the slave castles and they are angry or something like that. It's like, these people too, and things. Anyway, comments. He's asking whether, what is Amate do right? Are we willing or unwilling to confront the issue of enslavement, or is it something that we should just let go of?
out for more girls and
Thank you very much. My name is Adiloki. After watching these two films, I've come to realize that there is nothing we cannot achieve as women or ladies. I remember last year I went through similar situation as my sisters did, and then I kept on telling myself that yes, I want to do this, I want to be in school. In spite of what other people were saying, people were like, there's no way you can go, but I kept telling myself that this is what I want, this is what I want to do, and then I was able to make it. So after watching this film, it has really encouraged me that I can do even better than. So I thank you very much for bringing this. A round of applause.
My name is Samkio Samti, and actually I came in late, but after watching the film by Amata Edu, she's actually one writer I really adore so much. And I'm very happy she touched on slavery, because I think slavery forms an integral part of our history, and it can't or it should not be forgotten. Because when I read Frances Cress Wilson's ISIS papers, her theory on slavery, I realized that slavery actually defines us as Africans in a certain way. So I'm very grateful that she touched on slavery. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Do we have any further comments? Anybody who wants to go home can go. You don't have to stay, you know. Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I'm proud to be a Ghanaian, particularly this moment, and I'm proud to be with the Institute of African Studies. If you are proud to be here, please let me see your hands. Good. That's all I have to say.
Lily, there's a special request for you to say something. And since Obadili has done so much work, Dr. Campbell, to bring this program here, you have to oblige me, please.
Okay, good evening to you all.
Good evening.
And it's nice to be here. I was told about the program 3 days back by Sally. She WhatsApped me and told me about it. I wasn't sure I could make it because I wasn't really feeling well today. But I then decided to come to check it out. So I'm glad to be here. And to the females and to everybody else, I want to encourage you to study. Because you shouldn't allow your finances to stop you from saying you won't study or you won't continue your studies. No, you should have focus. You should do everything you can. Even if there's nobody to help you, you put in the effort. Just put in the effort. Somebody will see that effort and want to, help you. That's a few words I would like to say. Thank you for having me.
I just want to say thank you so much
You
for
have
Ghana.
to say who you are, otherwise we're going to say it. Yes.
Okay, I thought I introduced myself earlier. I'm Ephraim Andamaran from University of Missouri, the program coordinator for the Africa World Documentary Festival. I'm glad to meet you guys. The first time I watched this film sitting in my desk, I was like, oh my, this is the kind of film we want. Because this is a very positive film. It's not about Ghana. When we showed this film to our university, it actually brought a lot of discussion and a lot of attention. So I think, thank you for doing this. I hope Sally was here. I already communicated with her a number of times, but I'm glad to see you. It's a pleasant surprise for you guys. I always am happy to see directors or somebody pop up. So, which is great. And thank you for wonderful questions. I don't have anything to say. It's not my area, but I just want to answer my sister's question about the subtitle thing. This is an international film festival. As much as an African myself, as much as I hear and understand this, whenever we take this kind of films also to some of our brothers in the Caribbean, in Europe and other places, they always seem to have difficulty understanding our accent. And usually I understand it technical aspect, that sound effect, because these are mostly independent filmmakers. We encourage mostly independent filmmakers to submit to our film festival. Every year we receive up to 200 films. I have to go through 200 films to pick the 20, 30 ones. But I mean, but one of the challenges which we usually seem to have, especially in America, is whenever we have African films and people don't seem to understand us. I can't blame them to a certain extent, but at the same time, we can't force them to understand us. Well, my answer is always, you do have an accent, I don't understand you. So, think it that way. Whenever somebody says I have an accent, that means that language is not his, that's his, so that means that language is his second or third or fourth language. So that means you know other 2, 3, 4 language, so you are in a better position. So always see it that way. But unfortunately, the market kind of takes us to all these venues, and we do have the same issue with Caribbean films, and whenever there is no subtitle, there seems to be a little bit frustration with our audiences. So we encourage our filmmakers, we don't insist, but we encourage them to have subtitles. But it's unfortunately, unfortunate truth. Hollywood kind of dominates everything, that people understand American accent easily, but you always have difficulty understanding us. But again, there's also the flip side. When you hear Hollywood actors trying to pretend he's African by speaking our accent, that's like a different story. Anyway, once again, thank you so much for coming, and I really appreciate to see all these youngsters being inspired. Thank you.
Right. So I'm going to bring the session to a close unless I see a hand popping up, and ask Dr. Kambong, who has been coordinating this whole thing on this side, with me looming in the background, to say a few words.
Okay, you know I can talk long, but I'll say very few. Yes, one thing that came up is Amata Edu, where she was saying this is something that she did in her 3rd year of undergrad, right? Exactly, dilemma of a ghost. So it makes me think about you. What are you doing in your 3rd year that people will be talking about 40 and 50 years from now? Right? Some of you are saying you're so inspired. I want to see the inspiration where 10 years people are saying, oh, remember what you did in your 4th year. Remember what you did when you graduated, that you're changing the world through the things that you do. So we should be inspired, Black-spired to do more and reach greater and greater heights, because we've seen what our elder mother has done, our grandmother has done. So we should only try to build upon that legacy.
Right, thank you all very much. As Dr. Kambon said, you can do a lot now, I will again encourage those of you who want to join us to send